Can you guys believe this? The person behind the fatal blow that left Toan with a traumatic brain injury hovering between life and death was none other than his own mother, the woman he devoted his life to caring for. Diem Toan's wife was frozen in shock when she discovered the blood-stained stack of cash and the construction site key in the perpetrator's possession. How could a mother be so heartless? What horrific secret is hidden on that USB that drove her to destroy her own son to keep it buried? The terrifying truth is about to be revealed. A cold-blooded revenge and a fitting sentence for those who betray their own blood. Don't take your eyes off the screen because the ending will give you chills. Like this video and subscribe now so you don't miss a single moment of Diem's breathtaking journey for justice. The narrative. Mr. Thu's pickup truck slowed down as it turned onto a narrow red dirt road, flanked by lush pomelo groves heavy with fruit. The thick, sweet scent of the blossoms should have been peaceful, but for Diem, it tasted like the bitter sting of anxiety. Following a tip from locals about a kind-hearted stranger working for old Mrs. Jiao, the father and daughter had made their way to the edge of the forest. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, creating dancing patterns of light on the ground. But the darkness of uncertainty in Diem's heart wouldn't fade. "Dad, look," Diem whispered, her finger trembling as she pointed toward a small wooden house tucked away in the middle of the vast orchard. There, under the shadow of an ancient pomelo tree, a man was hunched over, hauling heavy baskets of fruit. He wore a faded t-shirt and rough trousers stained with mud. The custom-tailored suits were gone, as was the expensive watch and the polished look of a powerful CEO. All that remained was a solitary figure working hard like a man born from the soil. Diem stepped out of the car. Her legs felt weightless. She walked toward him, every step bringing back a flood of memories. His smile the day he proposed, the way he looked at her, right before he disappeared, and the sound of the train whistle during that final phone call. "Toan!" She called out, her voice so soft it was barely a whisper in the wind. The man stopped. He slowly straightened his back and turned toward the sound. When his face was fully revealed in the sunset, Diem felt her world shatter into 1,000 pieces. It was him. Those eyes, that bridge of his nose. But why did he look so heartbreakingly distant? He looked at her, but there was no shock in his eyes. No joy, not even a spark of recognition. It was the look of a stranger passing someone on the street. "Can I help you? Mrs. Jiao is inside if you're looking to buy pomelos." His voice was deep and low. It was still Toan's voice, but the warmth that used to wrap around Diem was gone, replaced by a politeness that felt cruel. Diem froze, the breath catching in her throat. You're calling me ma'am." "Toan, look at me. It's Diem. I'm your Diem." She rushed forward, grabbing his rough arm. Toan flinched instinctively, stepping back. His face showed confusion and a hint of defensiveness. "I'm sorry, you must have the wrong person. My name is..." "I don't have a name. People here just call me Nobody." He frowned slightly, struggling to find a name in the void of his mind. "I don't know you, and I don't know who Toan is." Behind them, Mr. Thu had approached. He stayed silent, watching Toan's every move. With his experience as a cop, he could tell this wasn't an act. Tuan's eyes were purely blank. He had truly been erased. Tuan, look at this necklace. Diem reached inside her collar and pulled out a puzzle piece pendant, the one they had promised never to take off. You said we were each other's final pieces. You can't forget. You're not allowed to forget. Tuan stared at the gold pendant shimmering in the evening light. Suddenly, a flash sparked in his eyes. A blurry image of a girl in a white dress, the sound of laughter in the wind, and a sharp stabbing pain at the base of his skull. He reached up to clutch his head, the basket of fruit sliding off his shoulder and crashing to the ground, sending the round pomelos rolling across the garden. Ah! A groan of agony escaped through his gritted teeth. Tuan, what's wrong? Diem cried out, rushing to steady him. The moment her skin touched his, it was like a psychic jolt. Inside Tuan's head, the shattered fragments of his memory began to spin violently. The screech of tires on asphalt. Huyen's cold laugh. You have to disappear so she can live. The roar of the train whistle at Dong Station. And the image of 2DM crying. Those images didn't come back clearly. They hit him like knife wounds to the brain. His blood pressure spiked, and Tone's eyes turned bloodshot, laced with red veins. He looked at Diem, her face blurring, then sharpening, then blurring again. Don't come near me. It hurts so much. Tuan roared, shoving Diem away. He clutched his head with both hands, as if trying to keep his skull from exploding. He stumbled backward, crashing against the old pomelo tree. The intense neurological pain was more than his body could handle. Tuan collapsed his breathing, coming in ragged gasps before he started to drift into unconsciousness. Right before the darkness completely swallowed him, he whispered a name so soft, only he could hear it. Diem. Run. Tuan Diem screamed, lunging forward to catch him as he went limp in her arms. Mr. Thu immediately knelt down, checking Tuan's pulse. He's in severe psychological shock. His memories are trying to break through the mental block. We have to move him. Now those guys have to be right on our tail. Right then, from the edge of the orchard, the roar of a gray truck engine thundered again. Its headlights cut through the rows of trees like the eyes of a demon. Diem wiped away her tears and looked at the unconscious man in her arms, his face etched with pain even in a coma. She wasn't afraid anymore. A fierce, cold strength rose up inside her. Dad, get him in the car. We're not running anymore. If Huyen and the rest of them want to play this game to the end, I'll show them 2DM might be weak for love, but for the person she loves, she can become their worst nightmare. The rain hammered down on the old tin roof, threatening to drown the poor neighborhood in a cold downpour. Diem bolted the door shut, her hand still shaking as she helped Tone into an old armchair. The flickering fluorescent light overhead cast a harsh glow on Tuan's gaunt, hollow face. The white bandage on his head had turned a stained yellow, covering the fatal wound, the mark of a failed execution. Diem knelt in front of her husband, her thin hands cupping his pale cheeks. Tuan didn't speak. His eyes stared blankly into space, his lips moving as he muttered nonsense. Tuan, look at me. It's Diem. We're home. No one can hurt you anymore. The only response was the roar of thunder outside and the wheezing breath of a man who was once the pride of the entire construction industry. Diem gritted her teeth, tears streaming down her face. but her eyes burned with pure hatred. She stood up and pulled a crumpled, blood-soaked scrap of paper from Tone's jacket pocket, something she had scavenged from the scene. "What did they do to you? How could they beat you like this, Toan? What did you see? What did you take from them?" She cried out in agony, then suddenly stopped when she saw Tone cower, his trembling hands flying to his head. He moaned, Don't hit me. I won't talk. Hollow steel. Mr. Trong. Don't." Diem went numb. The names started clicking into place like a horror movie. Old Man Trong, the director, who always patted Tone on the back, praising him every time he finished a project. Hollow steel. So that was it. Tone had uncovered the construction fraud, and they had tried to nail his memories shut with a fatal blow, so he could never open his mouth again. Diem walked over to the altar and lit a stick of incense. The heavy scent of sandalwood swirled into the thick, stagnant air. She stared at their wedding photo, at the version of Tone that was still smiling brightly, then turned back to look at the broken man in the chair. A cold, iron resolve took hold of her. "Tone, listen to me. The people who swung that club at your head, the people who gave the orders, I'm going to make every single one of them crawl at your feet. I don't want their money. I want them to pay exactly for what they did to you." The next morning, Diem began her mission. She tracked down one of Thong the Scar's lackeys, a notorious local thug. In a dark alley, Diem grabbed him by the collar and pressed a jagged piece of broken glass against his throat. "Where is Thang Speak? Unless you want your throat looking as shredded as my husband's head." The young man trembled, stuttering. "Diem, sis, I don't know. Thang was just following Mr. Trong's orders. He told us to just rough him up, but one of the guys went too far. They took Tuan to the vacant lot to finish him off, but they saw someone coming and bolted." Diem's eyes narrowed, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "Went too far. A blow that crushed his skull, and you call that going too far? You people treat human life like trash." She threw him aside, her head spinning from the bitter truth. "Those classy men in expensive suits use street thugs to take down an honest man." She went back home and tore through the documents Tone had left behind. In an old metal box hidden under the bed, she found a small memory card. When she plugged it into her phone, photos of low-grade steel and forged contracts appeared in crystal-clear detail. Most importantly, there was a short audio recording. Mr. Trong's voice rang out heavy with threats. "Toan, you're a smart guy. You should know when to keep your mouth shut. One signature from you is worth $1 billion. Don't leave your wife a widow this early." Then came Tone's voice, steady and firm. "Mr. Trong, people's lives are built on this concrete. I'm not selling out my conscience." Diem gripped the memory card, tears spilling over. "You idiot! Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you carry this all by yourself?" She walked over to Toan, who was curled up asleep on the bed. She gently stroked his hair, right where the scar was still raw and red. "Rest now. When you wake up, the people who hurt you will be gone. I won't let them sleep peacefully for another night." Diem didn't sleep that night. She prepared envelopes containing copies of the hard evidence. She sent them to the investigators, but she knew that wasn't enough. She wanted Trong and his crew to feel the terror of being hunted, of being backed into a corner, just like Tone was. Diem arrived at Trong's office at dusk. She marched past security and burst straight into his private office. Trong looked up at her, a look of pure contempt on his face. "What are you doing here? Come to beg for money to treat that vegetable of a husband." Diem calmly sat in the chair across from him and placed the memory card on the desk. "I don't want your money. I'm just here to give you some good news. My husband is starting to remember." And the first thing he remembered was the face of the man holding the iron pipe at the construction site that night. The color drained from Trong's face and his smirk vanished. You're lying. He's brain damaged. There's no way he remembers. Are you scared? If you didn't do it, why are you so afraid? Look at me closely, Trong. From this moment on, you're going to see me everywhere. In your dreams, in every drink you take, I will be the ghost haunting you for what you did to my husband. Diem stood up, leaned in close to him, and dropped her voice to a chilling whisper. The truth never dies. It just waits for the right day to crawl out of the ground. You and Thang the Scar better get ready. The handcuffs are waiting for you. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving Trong frozen in his air-conditioned office, beads of cold sweat rolling down his forehead. Stepping out of the skyscraper, Diem took a deep breath. The sky was beginning to clear after the rain. She knew this fight would be long and dangerous, but her heart was now filled with ironclad resolve. She would bring Tone back, not just his physical self, but his justice and his honor. When she got home, she found Tone sitting by the window. Seeing her, he managed a faint smile. His first smile after so many dark days. He reached out his hand, his voice weak but clear. "Diem, you're back." Diem collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Justice was finally in motion, and more importantly, her man was truly coming back to her. The people who hurt him would undoubtedly pay a heavy price for every drop of blood and every tear they had caused. Diem didn't stop after her confrontation with Trong. She spent an entire week scouring the call logs from Toan's smashed phone after successfully recovering the data. She noticed an unfamiliar number that had called him frequently at very late hours, right before the assault took place. Diem tracked down the address linked to that number. It was a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. When the door opened, the person standing there wasn't Trong or Thang the Scar. It was a scrawny young man with dark circles under his eyes from addiction. It was Toan's distant cousin too. Diem walked coldly into the house and threw a stack of photos showing Toan's injuries onto the table. "2. I know you're the one who led Thang's crew into the site that night. Your family. You knew the shortcuts where there were no cameras. Tell me who paid you." 2 trembled violently, backing into a corner as he stammered, "Diem. I didn't want to do it, but they promised to pay off my debts. They said they were just going to teach Tone a lesson, so he'd hand over the USB. Who it was, Trong, wasn't it?" Diem roared. 2 shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "No, Trong was just the one who carried it out. The person who gave me the money. The person who gave me the keys to the site gate. It was Auntie Phuong." Diem froze. Her ears rang as if 1,000 bells were chiming at once. What did you say? Which Auntie Puong Tuan's mother? You're insane to... Tu dropped to his knees at Diem's feet and pulled a fresh stack of cash, still in its original bank bands, from inside a pillow. Look at this. The bank strap has Auntie Phuong's signature. She said Tuan was holding on to a secret that could send the whole family to prison, including the family company she holds shares in. She said if they didn't stop him, they'd lose everything. She'd rather have Tone rest peacefully for a while than let him send the whole family to death row. Diem walked out of Tu's house, her feet barely feeling the ground. The biting winter drizzle soaked into her skin, but it wasn't nearly as cold as the truth tearing through her heart. How could a mother hire someone to beat her own son until he suffered a traumatic brain injury? How could she sit by Tone's hospital bed for the past month, weeping bitterly and praying for him to wake up when she was the one who ordered them to rough him up? Diem returned home. Mrs. Phuong was sitting there in the living room, holding a small bowl of porridge, tenderly feeding Tuan. The scene should have been sacred, but now, in Diem's eyes, it was revolting. Mom, you're working so hard. Diem said, her voice raspy and dripping with irony. Mrs. Phuong looked up. The usual kind expression in her eyes now made Diem shudder. It's nothing, dear. He's my only son. Seeing him like this breaks my heart. I just pray to God that the evil people responsible are punished soon. Diem gave a cold laugh. She walked over and placed her phone on the table, displaying the photo of Tu's stack of cash. The evil people will be punished soon, Mom. I just met with Tu. He told me you were the one who gave him the keys to the construction site. Mom, why? The bowl of porridge in Mrs. Phuong's hand hit the floor, shattering into pieces. Tuan flinched, looking confusedly at the two women. The air in the room turned heavy and stagnant, with only the ticking of the wall clock sounding like a countdown to judgment. Mrs. Phuong's expression shifted. Her kindness vanished, replaced by the cold, calculated face of a powerful woman. So you found out? Then I don't need to act anymore. Diem, you're young. You don't understand the weight of this family's legacy. Tuan was too rigid. He wanted to hand over evidence of his uncle's business dealings and mine and Trong's to the police. If he had done that, this family's name would have been dragged through the mud. I only wanted him to be scared enough to stop. I had no idea Thang's boys would go that far. Go that far! Diem screamed. Look at him! He can't remember his own name. He can't even hold a spoon. For some dirty money and a fake reputation, you murdered your own son's soul. Mrs. Phuong stood up, regaining her icy composure. She stepped toward Diem and whispered in a threatening tone, Listen to me, daughter-in-law. If this gets out, Tuan gains nothing. Assets will be frozen. I'll go to prison, and you'll be left raising a mental patient with absolutely nothing. If you keep quiet, I'll send Tuan abroad for the best treatment. You'll have money. You'll have everything. Don't let your cheap sense of morality ruin both of your futures. Diem looked at her mother-in-law, then at Tuan. Tuan was looking at her, and suddenly a strange spark of clarity lit up his eyes. His lips moved. Diem, give it to the police. Don't listen. He had heard everything. He was more lucid than she had realized. Tears rolled down Tuan's gaunt cheeks, the agony of a son whose own mother had tried to discard his life. Diem took Ton's trembling hand and looked Mrs. Puang straight in the eye. "You're right. I don't understand the weight of the family. But I understand the weight of being a human being. You gave up your right to be a mother the night you handed those keys to Tu. The evidence I gathered doesn't just implicate Trong. It includes you too. I've already sent a copy to a private lawyer. If anything happens to me or Tuan tonight, it all goes public." Mrs. Puang backed away, her face turning ashen. You dare betray this family." "I'm not betraying anyone. I'm just demanding justice for my husband, the only man in this family who still has a conscience." Early the next morning, police cars pulled up in front of Mrs. Puang's villa. Mr. Trong had been arrested the night before and had confessed to everything. Mrs. Puang stood in the foyer watching her daughter-in-law help her son into the ambulance to be transferred to another hospital. Before stepping inside, Diem turned back to look at her mother-in-law, who was now in handcuffs. There was no hatred left in her eyes, only pity. "You won every deal in the business world, Mom, but you lost everything in your own home." The ambulance pulled away, leaving behind the chaos of a sensational crime scene. Inside, Tuan gripped Diem's hand tightly. He couldn't say much yet, but that squeeze felt like a thank you, a vow that from now on, they only had each other. Diem rested her head on Tuan's shoulder and looked out the window. There was no rain today. The morning sun flickered through the leaves. She knew the road to Tuan's full recovery was still long, but she wasn't afraid. The villains had paid the price regardless of who they were. The secrets of the USB and the hollow steel had finally been brought to light. Justice may arrive late, and it may be heart-wrenching, but it always arrives. After confronting Mrs. Puang, Diem didn't go to sleep. She sat on the balcony, looking toward the distant horizon, where the high-pressure lights of the construction site, the place where Tuan had fallen, were still blinking. In her hands was a thick file, the result of sleepless nights and life-threatening risks. She knew that one small slip-up, and Mrs. Puang, with all her power and money, would flip the board. Diem picked up her phone and dialed an old friend who was now an investigative reporter. "Tomorrow morning, 8:00 a.m., bring your cameras to the corporate headquarters. I'm going to give you a truth that will shake the construction industry to its core." In the other room, Mrs. Puang remained terrifyingly calm. She was busy making calls to her underground contacts, trying to find a way to get rid of the remaining memory cards and documents. But she had no idea that Diem had already blocked every exit. Early the next morning, Thong the Scar and his lackeys were preparing to flee across the border on Mrs. Puang's orders to lay low. They were double-checking the cash she had promised them when suddenly the warehouse doors burst open. A cold voice rang out through a megaphone. "Freeze, drop your weapons." Nostam akarom hancher krart. Thang reached for a knife to fight back. But when he saw the muzzles of the police officers' guns and Diem's fiery gaze standing behind them, his knees buckled. He knew the game was up. As he was being handcuffed, he screamed, "It was her Mrs. Puang hired us. We just took the money to do a job. She's the one who wanted Tuan gone." Diem stepped forward, looking directly at the trembling thug. "You're the one who swung that club at his head. That blow didn't just damage his brain, it killed a man's faith. Now go inside and repent. At the same time, police cars surrounded the villa. Mrs. Puong was still dressed in her expensive clothes, holding a cup of lotus tea. When the inspector read the warrant for her arrest on charges of intentionally inflicting injury and violating construction regulations with serious consequences, the teacup slipped from her hand, shattering on the expensive marble floor. 3 months later, the case went to public trial. It was the day Diem had been waiting for the most, but also the day her heart felt the heaviest. Diem helped Tone into the courtroom. He could walk slowly now, and his memory had recovered about 70%. But every time he saw his mother, his eyes narrowed in pain. At the witness stand, Thong, the scar, confessed, "Mrs. Puong gave me 500 million. She said Tuan was ruining a major family deal. She told me to just beat him badly enough to keep him in the hospital for a few months so the project could get approved. I didn't realize his head was that hard." Whispers erupted throughout the courtroom as reporters frantically snapped photos. Then it was Mrs. Puong's turn. She stood there, stripped of her usual elegance, her hair having turned half gray. Her voice trembled, yet she still tried to justify herself. "I am his mother. Everything I did was for this family." Tuan was being stubborn. He wanted to sue his own uncle, to sue the very company I bled to protect. I only wanted to defend our family's legacy. Suddenly, Tuan stood up. His voice was still slightly slurred from the lingering effects of his injury, but every word rang out with steel. "Mom, you say you were protecting the family. What family is built on hollow concrete? What family uses their own son's blood as a foundation? You weren't protecting anyone. You were only protecting your own greed." The entire courtroom went silent. Mrs. Puong collapsed onto the table, her muffled sobs breaking through. It wasn't the cry of someone seeking forgiveness, but the cry of a defeated person who had lost everything: her reputation, her fortune, and her only son. The judge delivered the sentence with authority. Thang, the scar, and his gang, 12 years in prison for organized intentional injury with particularly serious consequences. Mr. Trong, 15 years for embezzlement and bribery. Mrs. Huang, 10 years for her role as the mastermind behind the assault and for her economic crimes. As Mrs. Puong was led past Diem and Tuan, she stopped looking at her son with a pleading gaze. But Tuan turned his face away, leaning his head on Diem's shoulder. He had chosen to forgive her in his heart just to move on, but he could not accept her presence in his life ever again. After the trial, Diem moved Tuan to a small house in the suburbs, far away from the glitz and the sins of the city. Using the compensation money and their remaining assets, Diem paid for Tuan's treatment and used the rest to establish a foundation to support young engineers who dare to speak out against corruption in the construction industry. That afternoon, golden sunlight bathed the small garden. Tuan was sitting there practicing his first lines of handwriting. Diem brought out a glass of orange juice and sat down beside him. Diem. Tuan looked up, his eyes regaining the sharpness they once had. "Thank you. If it wasn't for you, I'd probably still be a ghost haunting that construction site." Diem took his hand, the hands that had grown callous through months of fighting for him. We don't owe each other anything. I did it because I love you, and because I believe that the darkness can never hide the truth." They looked toward the distance where green sprouts were pushing up through the soil. The perpetrators were paying the price behind bars, and the dark secrets were finally buried under the dust of time. From now on, their lives would be a blank page, written with nothing but sincerity and boundless love.